everyone. I'm here with Bethany Downer. She is the Chief Communications Officer with Hubble Space Telescope at the European Space Agency, and I'll let her introduce herself. Can you tell me about yourself?
Sure. So I was born and raised in St. John's. It took me a while to find out exactly what it was that I wanted to do, but I've known that I've always loved space. So I worked really hard to find a way to work in the space industry. And now my job is a public communicator for space, which means I find ways of explaining rocket science to broader audiences, the general public. I think many people think that it's a complicated term or a hard industry to tap into. So it's my job to help improve that. And one of those means is through the Hubble Space Telescope. And I'm also planning to complete my first suborbital space flight in the coming years. So in addition to talking about space, I plan to go to space too.
Wow, that's so amazing. So what does your kind of day-to-day look like right now?
So, of course, as the case with many people, the pandemic changed a lot of things. Prior to this, I was traveling almost full time. I was based in Europe, but because of the pandemic, I was able to negotiate some remote working contracts. So I've now resettled here back home in St. John's, and most of my work takes place from the computer. So when traveling starts again, I'll be able to do so again, but it's nice to be able to be home for a while and to be working close to friends and family.
That's perfect. And students so often ask about what we can do from right here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
More than you think, right? So, and it's changed a lot of things. That's one thing that's quite fortunate that's come out of this new world that we live in, is that we're able to tap into things remotely, probably more than we were in the past. So I'm working hard to find means of bringing the space sector to Newfoundland as well. So all in a work in progress.
Right. So you said that you always wanted to work with space. Did you know that in high school?
Definitely. So it was a passion of mine from a young age. At first, I thought it would be something like, I'll grow out of it. It's often a cliche term that young kids say what they want to do when they get older, when they say they want to go to space or to study space. For me, that love for space only grew as I got older. I watched a space shuttle flight when I was a child. That only instilled it. Meeting astronauts, Chris Hadfield was a big one. I just learned the more I got older, that passion only got stronger. It didn't go away. And at the end of each school year, I often used to look back through my old notebooks and find what classes stood out to me the most, which ones I enjoyed. I used to use that empty space at the top of each page to write down things that, were of interest to me. And I thought I'd like to learn more about that. And I found that most things I could connect in some way through space. Space I've learned is connected to just about everything. But then it took some time to figure out what within space I wanted to do, because you could put the word space before and after just about any job. Anything from firefighters to doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, it all applies to space too. So I had to find out what I wanted to do within that umbrella of space, which also took a little bit of time. So once I realized it was space I wanted to do, I had just as much choices and trouble narrowing it down to figuring out what it was that was of passion for me.
Awesome. And what did help with that decision-making process?
Part of it was trying a little bit of everything. I tell anyone who's leaving high school or even in their first years after high school, try anything and everything, things that you didn't know existed, because finding things that you don't like are just as important as finding the things that you do. And I think it just takes time to get there, and you develop a strong sense of self and confidence in finding the things that you do want to do, because you're tapping into your interest as well as the things that you're skilled at. And it takes a little bit of time. And that was the case for me. I attended a master's program in France where I got to dip into all domains of space that allowed me to really narrow it down. And I found out I just love sharing space with people, especially those that aren't familiar with it. And I think it's an industry that most people steer away from because of the connotation around the word rocket science. And I really liked that there's a new and emerging field that hadn't really existed before when it comes to public communication for space. We often think of Bill Nye the Science Guy, and we need more of those now, specifically for space, because there's so much happening, and we want people that can explain what's happening to younger audiences, broader audiences, young and old, so that they can be excited about space too.
Awesome. I think there's a new one on Netflix, Emily's science lab.
Emily's Wonderlab. Emily Calandrelli is a good friend of mine. So I'm delighted that she's had so much success with Emily's Wonderlab. She was pregnant while she was filming it too, which I think is something that we don't see enough of, is pregnant women on our screens. And she's a fantastic science communicator, specifically in space as well. So all of us, it's a really tight-knit community for those of us that are doing public communications for space.
That's so nice. So what would you consider kind of your first career-related position way back?
Well, I think the earliest one that's still relevant today was at the Johnson Geocenter. I worked there while studying at Memorial University. I don't consider it a job, though. I honestly enjoyed every single minute of it. And people say that, that you'd work for free, but I, when you find something that you love to do, but instead I more so think about it that you'll work every day of your life when you find something that you love. And I think the Geocenter is a great example of that. It never felt like a chore. It never felt like a task. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the work. I really enjoyed the public aspect of that, giving them tours, explaining to them the geological history of our province. Even if it was a tour of the Titanic exhibit, I still liked sharing that content with them, even if it wasn't space related. But there was a space section there, of course, so I was able to tap into that now and again. But that was probably my first example of that science communication that I came to love and do for a living. The first one specifically within the space sector was an internship as part of my master's program, which was at the European Space Agency in the United Kingdom. And I helped a lot with the outreach for the astronaut Tim Peake, who had recently returned from space. So he's very similar to the Chris Hadfield for Canada as he is for the UK. So it was such a huge learning experience for me to follow him around for a summer and also support ESA's activities with the public that year, so that I could really tap into what it was like to work in the domains of outreach and being that bridge between the public and the space.
So you were doing your your Bachelor of Science at Memorial and your master's at the International Space University. Have you still do professional development to keep up to date?
All the time. I like to think, even if it's not formal professional development, if you're not in a job where you're developing yourself and learning, that it's time to move on to something else. But there are various courses that I'll be taking, particularly in leadership is something that I've been tapping into for the past couple of years, because I'm now in a coordinator and management role for different parts of my work. So I wanted to learn how to be a better leader, learn from those that were great leaders for me, and also how I can be a better one myself. So that's something that I've taken upon in the past few years. But that's the number one tip I give to anyone that's joining my team, especially the interns, that if you find you're not learning in this role anymore, then it's time for you to move on to something else. You should always be bettering yourself, always be learning. And luckily with space, it's quite easy to do, because just about everything you're doing is taking place for the first time. Any science paper, any science discovery, new technology that's developed, it's usually a first, and you're doing it for something that's so weird and crazy that you kind of have to push the limits of what you might have thought of before. So in space, it's pretty easy to keep yourself challenged and to be doing new things. So I'm very fortunate for that.
That's some great advice. Do you have a high point of your career to date?
There's a few. I think one of them, you might have heard the term elevator pitch, which means that you'd have to give someone a rundown of what you're looking for, who you are, what you want to achieve in the very short time span of an elevator ride. And ironically, I was actually in an elevator with Bill Nye, the science guy, and he asked me what I wanted to do. And this was in Australia. And at the time, I hadn't established much of a career yet. I had just graduated, still feeling a bit lost, wondering what to do. And I told him, I want to be just like you in communicating space specifically for the people. And he said, don't be the next Bill Nye, be the first Bethany Downer. You don't need to necessarily do something that someone's already done. Take it and make it your own. So I've been taking that with me ever since I met him. That was a great little piece of advice. I've also had great engagements with Chris Hadfield. Having met Apollo astronauts, those that have walked on the moon, I think are things that I'll take away with me. I've had the pleasure of meeting various astronauts from around the world, from many different countries, and I take something from each of them because they've all had different experiences. Another highlight I'll mention is that 2020 was the 30th anniversary of the Hubble Space Telescope, which has really transformed science as we know it. When it launched, we didn't know how old the universe was. We didn't even know that it was growing or expanding. And we also didn't know about the planets beyond our own solar system. So thinking about that now, it's a bit crazy of just how much we've expanded in terms of our knowledge in that time. So it was a big milestone to reach 3 decades of operations last year, and I coordinated those celebrations for Europe. So being an integral part of those celebrations and recognizing Hubble's work, which was a huge celebration for the public around the world, was quite special because it was a significant milestone. So I enjoyed every minute of that as well.
Wow, that's just so amazing that you were able to take part in that. And I hadn't, when you put it in context like that, that we hadn't known and that it was even expanding 20 years ago or 21 years ago now is wow. I'd never thought about that one.
That's right.
So do you have a kind of career goal right now?
The closest one is that first space flight. I say first because I don't know how many I'd like to do after that. Maybe after one, I'd say I'm good, I'm great. Maybe next I'll want to go even further because there are different vehicles that are being developed now. Some are going to the edge of space, some are going in orbit around the Earth, some are going higher. I don't compare them because I think they're all experiences in space. So for me, once I've had my first, I'll be able to evaluate, do I want to do this again? So I'm confident it will happen within the next 5 years or so. So I'm excited just to reach that milestone and to make that happen. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to. In terms of my everyday work, my two primary roles, the first, as you mentioned, with the Hubble Space Telescope, will soon, we will have another space telescope that's launching, which is the James Webb Space Telescope, which people have been waiting for years and years. We're just as excited. But for those who are younger than Hubble, like me, we haven't had one to look forward to and to launch. And so to watch the new one taking place, that'll be bigger and better. We're quite excited for that, which will be launching later this year. And I also work with an organization called Star Harbor, and they are set to be the first publicly accessible spaceflight training and research and development campus. So imagine a Disneyland for space, or a university that's all space, a huge campus, but you can train to go to space there. You can learn all about it, and it's all based in one location in the US. So that's something that's in development too. So these are the two projects that I'm mainly working on. And personally, I just want to keep developing myself within those roles, improving myself as a leader, accepting new opportunities, and enjoying it as it each comes, because space moves quickly and things happen fast and it's exciting, but it's important to enjoy the moments as they happen, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Is there a particular advancement that you're keen on seeing within your lifetime? Maybe not something that's in the next 5 years, but further out?
Yeah, absolutely. One that's probably within the next decade will be the first woman and the first person of color to walk on the moon. We haven't had a human walk on the moon since 1972. And so it's been quite some time since the Apollo era. I think we're itching to get back, and we have the means to get back now. So we're excited that it's happening. But I think young girls need to see women that are walking on the moon too. Everyone that did so far has been male. So it's about time. We also need a person of color to do the same. I also like to reassure people that within our lifetimes, we will watch the first person make their steps on the Martian surface. So on Mars as well. It's coming a little bit later than the moon, but these are some really huge, significant things that we can look forward to. I mean, these will be so history-making moments. I think of now of, we hear our grandparents tell us what it was like to watch the first people walk on the moon. Well, imagine us being able to live stream the first people walking on Mars. It's quite exciting.
It is very exciting. So do you have any advice for youth considering a similar career path?
If they're considering space specifically, I always say to find a domain you like and then move it within space. So if you want to be a space doctor, because our bodies change a lot when we're in space, first learn how to be a doctor, then apply it to space medicine. If you want to fly a rocket one day, first I'll suggest that you learn how to fly an Earth-based plane, and then you move that into space. But we're also going to need things like plumbers and city planners to help us build the bases on the moon. So any domain you can think of, we're going to need you in space. So first learn how to do that on Earth and then apply it into space. That's the best way to move into it. And this future in space is happening. If you're looking for a guaranteed sector, it's one of them, which is very hard to find these days. So I tell anyone to find what you like to do. Maybe it's chemistry, so you can study astrobiology. We're looking for life in space. There are so many areas out there that you could tap into. So just find that domain that interests you most, and then you could apply it to space. And for those who are looking, more broadly, and I just encourage, again, anything that you can think of, even if it's something you've never heard of before, it's worth trying. it is a little bit intimidating these days to see how many options there are in terms of the opportunities out there. And the best way is to just start trying it, because you're also going to learn more about yourself as you're doing that too. I also say, though, it's not a straight road to the top. It's much more like walking a dog. You're going to have sudden jolts to the left and right. You're probably going to be halted and take a break for a bit. Then you're going to be pulled forward. There's a lot of ups and downs and all of that. But I did not learn the most from when I was pulled forward. I learned the most from when I was held back, about myself, how I adapted, how to be better. So embrace those. When things go wrong, it's almost a gift, really, because you're learning more about yourself and how to be better. And if everything always went right, you're not improving yourself. So it's an exciting time that we're in for. So if anyone wants to look into space, or if there's any women who want to tap into a field that's particularly dominated by men, which, the aerospace industry is as well, only 11% of those who have been to space so far are female. So there's work to do. But this is all the more reason why you deserve a seat at that table. If you walk in and you find that the people that are around you look different than you, they identify differently than you, that means you should be in that room. You should be having your voice heard. Even though it's intimidating, even though it's scary, you are paving the way for someone behind you to have an easier path. So I think that's something that I encourage. And if there's ever people who are scared by a statistic like that, only 11% of astronauts, that's all the more reason why we have work to do, and you should help us be part of that.
And there's great support networks out
Absolutely.
there to help with that. And individuals such as yourself, once they get out into the field and if they end up at the International Space University, then I'm sure that
they know who to call. That's right.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to kind of wrap this up on. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the members today?
The only other thing I'll add is if they ever want to reach out to me, ask for advice or some encouragement, I always want to follow along with those in my networking community. They can find me on social media, and I'd be happy to offer some encouragement if there's anyone out there that's looking for some advice as well. I know it can be intimidating when people are looking to change fields or to enter a new field, and we can share stories, and I can have to offer any advice that I might have, but I'm hopefully to be readily accessible on my website and social media too.
You know what? I'm going to make during our summer summit for July, we're having some gamification in which the participants can actually win a Microsoft Surface Go, and I'm going to make your Twitter handle a gamification code. So
amazing.
Listen here, look up Bethany on Twitter, and that's right. Your gamification code for this session. Thanks so much, Bethany, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And just thank you again. This was wonderful.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the weather. Thanks a lot.
Bye.